Welcome, everyone. Nice to see all of you. If you're able to turn your cameras on, it would be great to see you. If not, we completely understand. But I'm so happy to see all of you here. I want to wish everyone a happy spring, and I want to welcome you all to the final event in this month's Climate Grief and Growth series, which is co-hosted by Reimagine and the Good Grief Network. My name is Andrew Engel, and I am Senior Programmer at Reimagine. My pronouns are he, him. Today, I have a black and white striped shirt. I've got glasses, salt and pepper hair. I'm a white cisgender male. In the back, I've got a bright orange wall. Reimagine's mission is to help all people face adversity, loss, and mortality, and channel the hard parts of life into meaningful action and growth. Laura is the founder of Good Grief Network, a nonprofit organization that brings people together to process collective grief, eco-distress, and overwhelming feelings concerning collective planetary crises. And she's the author of the forthcoming book, How to Live in a Chaotic Climate, 10 Steps to Reconnect with Ourselves, our communities, and our planet. And you'll get a little taste of this today in this workshop. And I will paste some links in the chat to learn more about Laura, Good Grief Network, and her book. Hello again, Laura. It's good to see you.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me.
It's been great having you for these past 3 sessions. I'm so grateful for the knowledge that you've passed along to us and to see you interact with so many wonderful guests. Last week, I thought your dialogue with Kyra Jewel Lingo was outstanding. Kyra Jewel is a Buddhist teacher, and the focus of that conversation was all about taking action. And now we're doing this workshop with you, which is all about experiencing and moving with this grief and navigating this grief in a very hands-on, practical way. But going back to last week, you took some excellent notes and summarized some of Kyra Jewel's talking points. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think often when we're thinking about action, particularly with the climate crisis, it's always these big, vast, grand actions that tend to be external from ourselves. And what came up last week in the conversation with Kyra Jewel is moving towards things that scare us is an important action. Finding ways to cultivate compassion and wisdom is important. Finding community, building community, even if it's a small group of friends with similar concerns. We also talked about how important it is to stay present in the moment and to find things and to remind ourselves often of the things that bring us joy. And then another one that Kyra Jewel Lingo advanced was to work in tandem with a landscape or a creature to help navigate the climate crisis, really understand kinship, which also goes back to the first event that we co-hosted together. Kinship came up a lot in that conversation.
Well, thank you for bringing me so much joy in this collaboration with you and Good Grief Network.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. So you folks ready to dig in to experience some climate grief and move it and process it? All right. I am really appreciating the excitement from Wanda. Thank you. All right. I first of all want to thank you all for being here. I know touching and experiencing grief is not the most fun thing to do on a Wednesday afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. I also want to honor that our attention is one of our most precious assets, and you're choosing to spend your time and your attention here with me doing this hard work, hard but rewarding work. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for showing up. And I also want to remind you that all of you, your entirety is welcome here. So that means all of your feelings are welcome here. Your tears as well as your joy are welcome here. I encourage you to keep your cameras on. I know in some talks and events that we do, it's okay to turn the cameras off, but if you feel okay to turn your camera on, I'd love to experience this event with you. It's more of a workshop and less of a lecture. I will have some teaching components on it, but I'd love to know that we're in community together and to be able to see the faces of everyone. If you don't right now have something to write with or a sheet of paper, will you take a moment and go get those things? We're going to be doing some journaling together. So because we're going to be exploring some tender feelings and sharing some of our experiences, we need some community agreements to help guide our way. We need some kind of rules of engagement of how we're going to be with each other in this space. I propose that for our workshop today that we carry ourselves with the following agreements. I would love for us to practice self-responsiveness, which we like to call boundaried self-care. It means that you know yourself better than us as guides and hosts know. So if you need to step away, turn your camera off, use the washroom, top off your tea, please do that. Take care of yourself. We also would like for you to respect the hosts, each other, and yourself throughout this process. We would like for you to practice intentional slowness. So we'll engage with some pauses. We're really here to experience and not to rush through. I'd also like for you to be curious with what arises. Some of the things that come up might surprise you, and just engage with it in a way that keeps your curiosity open. Don't just shut down because something scares you or surprises you. Try to engage with curiosity. And then we'll do some breakout rooms. I would really love it if you folks would go into some breakout rooms a little bit later, maybe toward the middle of our time together. And the rule that I would like for us to follow is that before sharing twice in your small group, leave space for everyone to share once. So share for your allotted time and provide space for everyone else to do it. Okay, thank you for those. I do want to talk for a brief time about who am I and why I do this work and what brings me to this work. And I think it's important to know that I navigate this world with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And because of that, I have anxiety and depression. So the lens through which I see the world is a lot of anxiety and depression, which sometimes can make it hard to be a change maker in the world. I have also experienced tremendous losses through my life and didn't have the support I needed to heal. So as I was moving through the world, I realized that I had to make the choice over and over again to live disconnected or emotionally muted, or I could work to rediscover joy and connection and meaning. I think that's a choice that we all have to make throughout our lives. And because I deeply care for our siblings worldwide and this planet and our fellow species, and of course, landscapes, that I want to work to minimize suffering and help create nurturing cultures that prioritize justice in life. So I realized that if I wanted to preserve my energy and my work as a change maker, that I was going to have to face the heavy and painful feelings that arise again and again, that I'd have to learn how to heal my traumas and integrate the inner work with the outer work of the world. And this combination of the inner and the outer is so desperately needed in these times, which we've been focusing on the last two events for the Climate, Grief, and Growth series. I've been learning ways to I've been learning ways to befriend my grief and my eco-distress, and to see the lessons that are available from actually processing these feelings. To share some of these lessons, my wife and I created a peer-to-peer support program where we face these seemingly impossible truths about the state of the world. We build community and we reimagine what meaningful work looks like in deeply disruptive times. The climate crisis and ecocide are much too big to cope with alone. And so we need other people, which is why we brought you here today. We're here to be in community to face these things that are really hard to face by ourselves. So more about climate grief. As the storms and fires rage on, as the news offers frightening headlines, as we witness suffering worldwide, and the newest scientific report warns of biosphere collapse, grief is all around us. It's in the ether that we swim in. And many of us tend to exhibit low distress tolerance. We've forgotten how to be with discomfort. We live in a culture that has extreme resistance to honoring and processing grief. And because of this, maybe we don't have the tools to feel it. Maybe we don't have the tools to process it. So instead we stuff it, we avoid it, we run from it. However, Francis Weller, who describes himself as a soul activist, he's also a therapist and an author. He teaches that there is a gravitas, a wisdom gathered through intentionally working through our grief. Grief hollows us, it reorients us, it crumbles us down until we're at the ground floor of everything we know, everything we think, everything we feel. It readies us for deep change, which is exactly what post-traumatic growth is about. It's finding the opportunity after experiencing the devastation. In the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report that was just released Monday, the world scientists warned that if we don't act now, right now, that we're going to face even more devastation than we're already seeing. So it's time to move away from our dependence on fossil fuels. To survive the impacts of the climate emergency, rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society are required. And these are words quoted from the IPCC website. What they're saying is they're calling for a reordering of every facet of the dominant culture. How we cultivate and distribute foods and goods, how we heat our buildings, the ongoing wars, the ways we interact with one another on a day-to-day basis, everything has to change. And there is tremendous opportunity to reimagine our systems, our connections, our ways of being with each other and the earth as a whole. But we can't get there on fossil fuels and exploitation, which means that nearly everything in the dominant paradigm has to change. So we're tasked with co-creating new systems that are focused on life, equality, and justice. And we can't make this transition without tremendous grief work. It's important to know that grief is a universal connector. None of us will move through this life without touching it in some form. Yet we tend to keep our grief private. We hide it from those closest to us. Today, with all of us here, we're going to practice courage, we're going to honor our losses, and we're going to move through some grief together with the support of the other people in this room. And though it's painful, there are many gifts to grief work. Rumi taught us that sorrow prepares us for joy. It reminds us of the intensity of our love. In a powerful essay, Melkia Devic-Serrell says, grief in all of its forms has the potential to bring us closer to the truth of the world, to make us more tender and more filled with delight. And don't we all want a little bit more delight in our lives? Francis Weller says that grief and love are sisters, woven together from the beginning. Their kinship reminds us that there is no love that does not contain loss, and no loss that is not a reminder of the love we carry for what we once held close. Adrienne Marie Brown reminds us that grief calls us into deeper engagement with those things that we love. And even as we're losing them, grief wants us to exalt their beauty. And one more quote for right now, Robin Wall Kimmerer says, if grief can be a doorway to love, then let us all weep for the world we are breaking apart so we can love it back to wholeness again. Today, together, we're going to notice our grief. We're going to name it, we're going to share it, and we're going to move it here in community. But first, let's fully arrive here. We do a grounding exercise a lot in Good Grief Network. I'm going to teach you one now. If you will, take a moment to pause. And if it feels nourishing, go ahead and let out a long exhale. I'm going to take a drink while we do that. All right. So this is an orientation exercise. It reminds us to be here and now. And if our anxiety gets the best of us and has us stuck in this future thinking and projecting a terrifying world, we can come back to this exercise. I'll ask you to notice 5 things in the room that you can see and really take it in. Notice the color, the texture, the vibrancy. 5 things you can see. I invite you to notice 4 things you can hear. Can you hear the things near you? Are there sounds that are farther out? 4 things you can hear. I invite you to notice 3 things you can feel. Perhaps you have a pen in your hand. Maybe you can feel your clothing, where your clothing meets your skin. 3 things you can feel. I invite you to notice 2 things you can smell. You can smell your clothes, your armpits, your dog, if your dog's near you. And finally, 1 thing you can taste. Is there residual taste in your mouth from something you ate or drank earlier? Do you have a cup of tea or water? What's something you can taste? All right. So welcome again to this space. I'm going to read a series of poems throughout our time together. We're going to do some journaling and breakout rooms, and then we'll finish with some movement to actually move and process that grief that's stuck inside of us. But I'll start with the poem To Speak by Denise Leverotov. Denise says, "To speak of sorrow works upon it, moves it from its crouched place, barring the way to and from the soul's hall." Okay, I'm going to read a poem by Donna Ashworth from her collection Loss, and it's called Some Days Are for the Grief. Some days are just for grief, no joy, no memories, no reminiscing fondly of all that was shared, just soul-sucking, heart-wrenching grief. Some days are for the grief, and that's okay. But on the days when grief is love again, when the weight of loss lifts a little, let that love out. Let that love shine forth like the beacon of hope that it is. Some days are for the love, and that's okay. This journey is a balancing act. Just balance. I know you folks have been able to engage with a few others, but I'd like to open it up to the chat so that we can see you folks. I don't know that we'll be able to read out loud all of your responses, but I invite you to name your grief. I invite you to start your comment with, "I mourn for," and then consider, are you carrying grief for a person, for an animal companion, a landscape, a specific place, a species, a social injustice, the political divide, something else? What are you mourning for? Let us hold you in that in this collective. I mourn for human decency and behavior and discourse. I hear you. Are there other things you'd like to share? I mourn the suffering of all beings, the fear and anxiety being carried by so many. I hear you. I mourn for the loss of my joy and hope and optimism. We have been shown time and time again that those in power will not change, and I don't know what to do or how to fix it. I feel that. Feel it. The loss of so many species, these sentient beings. I mourn for chickadees, meadowlarks, and bobolinks, the pure joy they bring. I mourn for suffering. It's going a little fast, but I'm grateful to see all of your mourning, and we're holding it with you. Watersheds that are being destroyed.
Sarah says, "I mourn for the suffering that is occurring while there is a potential for a world where all can thrive."
Yeah.
Rachel says, I'm mourning for the marine mammals that keep washing ashore nearby. I'm mourning for actual peace through actual justice. Lindsay, I mourn for the California mountain towns that will never be rebuilt. Maria, I mourn for my children's future. Lori, I mourn for our collective inability to stem the tide. From Lisa, I am mourning our beautiful watershed, which is being destroyed. From Catherine, I mourn for Fluffy, the bodhisattva semi-feral who taught me to be present, but was poisoned. Rest in peace, Fluffy. From Amy, I mourn for my dad and my family's loss of the man who protected us and challenged us at the same time. From Kai, I mourn for all the places devastated by fires and floods. I mourn for all the innocent beings who have suffered and died. I mourn for all the injustice that causes unnecessary suffering. I mourn the places I love that have been lost. From Neil, I mourn for loss. From Wanda, I mourn for suffering, for hopelessness, for trees burning, homes and towns flooded, cancer, dementia, Syria, Ukraine, Pakistan, girls who cannot go to school, all suffering. From Lindsay, I mourn for the lost time. We have had so much time to change our ways, and it feels like it has been squandered. From Sarah, I mourn the civility and sense of working together. I mourn the ability for all to find common ground, for equality of all, including nature. From Catherine, I mourn the loss of collective responsibility and sense of community. From Neil, I mourn for the suffering of all people in life. Madeline, I mourn for community and perceived separateness. From Catherine, I mourn for losing hope. Carla, I mourn the passing of so much beauty from the world, all we see and cannot see. And from Irene, I mourn for migrant workers, for farms, for the perpetually displaced.
Thank you, folks, for sharing those things. We're holding them with you. If this would feel nourishing, you're welcome to do another one of those big, long exhales. I see a couple more coming in. We're holding those losses to what you're mourning for. I have another poem, which is The Unbroken by Rashani Rhea. And it says, there is a brokenness out of which comes the unbroken, a shatteredness out of which blooms the unshatterable. There is a sorrow beyond all grief which leads to joy, and a fragility out of whose depths emerge strength. There is a hollow space too vast for words, through which we pass with each loss, out of whose darkness we are sanctioned into being. There is a cry deeper than all sound, whose serrated edges cut the heart as we break open to the place inside which is unbreakable and whole, while we learn to sing. Oh, I pushed something. I don't even know what I pushed.
You're fine, Laura.
Thanks. Yeah, I can get a list of the poems and their names, and I'll get them over to Andy, so they'll be included in the email that goes out. All right, I have one more activity and one more poem, and then we'll start to wrap up our time together. And this one might make you a little bit uncomfortable, and I kind of hope it does, but you're invited to participate with me. I understand that some of you might not be in a private space where you can make some noise. And so if this is the case for you, I recommend doing this practice at another time. I invite you to stand up if you feel comfortable doing so. You can also remain seated. I just feel like I'm more powerful when I'm standing. And I'm going to invite you to sound out, to vocalize your grief. And I'll tell you how we're going to do it, and we're going to do it together. So you can howl, yowl, wail, growl. You can make any other sound that feels nourishing to you. What I'd like for you to do before making a sound is to check in with your body and see what your body wants. My second question for you is, where does your grief live in your body? And when you're making a sound, when you're vocalizing your sorrow and your grief, I want you to imagine the spots of grief in your body moving up and out through your mouth. You're going to actually be moving your grief out of your body. You might want to turn the volume down on your computer because I'm going to invite all of you to unmute and do it with me. I would love a whole chorus of sounds of grief moving through our bodies. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to count down from 3. And we're going to make these sounds for 15 seconds. So you are invited to unmute your camera. You're invited to locate your grief in your body. And you're invited to vocalize that grief in 3, 2, 1. How did that feel for you folks? You want to do it one more time? Same rules. Locate that grief in your body. I'm going to count down from 3, and we're going to vocalize this together for 15 or 20 minutes. We're getting in touch with our animal bodies. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. My dog started howling with us. All right. I'm gonna sit down.
Come sit on me.
Thank you, folks. If that was nourishing for you, I recommend doing it again and maybe inviting some friends or family to do it along with you. I have another poem, which is by Elizabeth Cunningham, and it's called Heart Prayer. This will be my last poem for today. It says, you can only pray what's in your heart. So if your heart is being ripped from your chest, pray the tearing. If your heart is full of bitterness, pray it to the last dreg. If your heart is a river gone wild, pray the torrent. Or a lava flow scorching the mountain, pray the fire. Pray the scream in your heart, the fanning bellows. Pray the rage, the murder in the morning. Pray your heart into the great quiet hands that can hold it, like the small bird that it is. As we move to close out our time together, I'd like for you to give yourself an extra moment after we wrap up. I know Andy's going to speak a little bit after me, but just give yourself a moment before you go rushing back to your normal life. I'd like for you to send some gratitude to yourself for showing up for you and your grief, for expressing courage and being here with us, moving your grief in a vocal way, going into breakout rooms, which sometimes is hard for us. I'd like for you to be tender and patient and kind with yourself. And also, because we touched so much grief today, it might be with you as you move throughout your day. And so if you're still feeling tender, if you're still feeling that grief, please reach out to someone who can offer additional support. If you have a human, a friend, a family member, that's great. Animal companions are great too. And we in Good Grief like to teach that trees or rivers and houseplants are also capable of holding that sorrow with you. So thank you. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for touching that grief with me today. And I'll pass it back to Andy.
Can we have a howling round of applause for Laura for this amazing experience? I have to say, listening, I wasn't howling myself. I was listening to the howling, and it was so powerful. You know, I don't know if some of you have attended a Reimagine vigil in the past. Our executive director, Brad Wolf, often will end those vigils with having everyone share the word love at the very end. It's very sweet. But I have to say, this was much more powerful to hear the raw emotion, the anger, the pain. It was very therapeutic for me. So thank you so much. Thank you for all of you for joining us. It's good to see some familiar faces from the past 2 events that we've done also with Climate Grief and Growth. I hope you'll join us next month. We're launching a new series on spiritual grief and growth, and we'll be inviting all kinds of folks from faith-based groups, from spirit-based groups, to explore the kinds of spiritual crises that we often face when we lose a loved one. So check out our calendar for that and register. I'm going to repaste here in the chat a link to the entire series of Climate Grief and Growth, links to the recordings, link about Laura and the Good Grief Network, and her new book. Yes, you'll all be getting a follow-up with a recording. We'll try to include those poetry selections. So Laura, thank you again. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. And we hope to see you soon at other Reimagine events. Take good care.
Thanks, folks. Take care.